Hi, I'd like to talk about the introduction to mass communication. Basically, just want to talk kind of about the first chapter of the book and a few key points in it. One of the things I think is kind of interesting, or one of the things that makes mass communication interesting, is that, there's a few kind of terms or things that we need to get out of the way. The first one is that sometimes we use the term the media, and we sometimes refer to the medium. And media is just the plural of medium, and medium is very similar to the concept of like a medium beverage or a something that's medium. It's the one that's in the middle, right? So medium literally means middle, and so media is the plural of that, which is basically the things that are in the middle. And in the end, what media is it is the things that are the middle that allow for communication to take place, the transmission, the information. So, for example, if you're taking this class, the medium by which you get it, the thing in the middle, is an online program like Blackboard or YouTube or a video or other things like that. And so that is what we would call the thing in the middle. And so media is just the thing in the middle. So the media, for example, between the president and what you read in the paper is people like reporters and other people in the news who go out and get the information, who gather it and give you that information. And so they're mediating it. That's why we use the term mediating. They are acting as a middle. They're taking the information, they're processing it, they're giving it to you. They're trying to give it to you in a way that's easy to understand, perhaps taking other sources and including them so that you get a more comprehensive into the story rather than just one person's version of the story. They're taking kind of parts, they're fact-checking, they're getting information, and that's why we call them media. Media is the thing in the middle. Well, in this class, we're talking about mass communication, but we're talking about media in general. And so we're basically talking about the things that come, that are the technologies, the people, the things that act as these ways in which we communicate. And so this is a communication course. And the first thing about communication is communication requires you have a person who gives the information. It then transmits to the person who then decodes, interprets, and retransmits a response. And then the other person, while they're giving the message, decodes, interprets, and responds, and they adjust their message. This happens a lot, like, for example, in a conversation, I may be saying something, and if you're kind of looking off in the other direction or you're falling asleep, I'm getting a very clear message back from you. There is what we call a feedback loop. I am sending you a message, but you're communicating a message back to me, which is you're boring and I'm falling asleep. So what happens is in all communication, whether it be interpersonal, which is communication that happens between two people or between a group of people, that would be considered interpersonal communication because there's no mediation of it. There's no thing in between. Whereas mass communication requires a mediating technique, because what mass communication is you have one communicator or one speaker who is then delivering, or person who is communicating, who's then sending out that message to lots of receivers. So instead of it being kind of me sending my message to one person, or even in a group, me speaking to 4 or 5 people simultaneously and taking back feedback from all of them, in mass communication, it is done through certain mediums that allow for you to transmit this information to a very large group of people. And so one person is speaking, and there may be 1,000 receivers who are then decoding, interpreting, and giving feedback. Now, the feedback loop in a mass media situation is very slow. It's not very quick. Like, for example, if I'm talking to you, for example, I have a class that I meet with some of the students in small groups. And so I'll meet with 1, 2, 3 students instead of a class of 20, and I'll talk and I'll say the same thing to all of them, right? And by the end, I'm really getting bored because I've said the same thing 6 times. But one of the things you notice is I very quickly, they'll say, wait, I don't understand that. I don't, so there's a very immediate feedback. But if I'm in a group of 20 people, people are a little bit more hesitant to do it. Well, for example, now here, I am delivering my message through a medium of YouTube, through video, through recording of the lecture. And so what happens is is I am now giving you this message in a way that is, going to be very slow for me to receive the response from it. And so what happens is I am essentially sending the message out, and you're encoding, I'm encoding the message, I'm sending it out, you're decoding it, interpreting it, and you're sending back the message. But it may come, that message, that return message is how you did it, how you received this information, how you interpret the situation, how you did that, is probably going to come through a method of, how I look at how well you did on the exams. Maybe you'll send me an email and say, I didn't understand that very well, or that just made no sense, or you'll send me an email and say, hey, I really like that, I thought that helped, or I didn't find that helpful, or, things like that. And so that's how I get feedback. And then when I get that feedback, I adapt, and then maybe it'll take a while, and it's a very slow process. So mass communication is still a form of communication because there is a message sent out. But for example, with mass communication, it became possible. It really wasn't even possible until about 500 or 600 years ago with the creation of, say, for example, reading, or not reading, but printing. Reading was around, but most of the writing was done via handwritten messages, right? And people would have handwritten and copied books and so it would have been a very limited mass communication. But when they invented the printable, movable type by Gutenberg, it allowed for the opportunity for one person to put their message out and for it to be received by a mass audience, by a very large audience with lots of people receiving it. And what happened is that led to the rapid increase in the number of books. It also led to the creation of newspapers and magazines and other print things. Then you came along and there was the invention of radio and telephone, which allowed for other form of mass communication, then eventually film and TV, and eventually the internet and video games and a lot of others. And all of these are a form of one person sending out a message. Sometimes the message is very encoded. Like, for example, in video games, it may not be like somebody's directly telling you. Storytelling may not be very direct, but they're all sending out a message. And then what happens is the readers read it, and if they don't buy the magazine, they don't buy the newspaper, they don't pay for the online website, they don't click on it, you don't get very many sales, or you don't get it. And so you get a message back, which is people don't care about what we're doing. And you know what works. Now, in today's day and age, we can get a very good message, we can get a very quick response on what's selling, what's interesting, because like, for example, with websites, we can measure the number of clicks on a website very quickly, very easily. We can measure and go, okay, this website got 32 clicks. This story got 45,000. This video got viewed 1 million times. I can give you this video. I can see if you guys are finding this video interesting and watching it, because I can look and see the number of views, and I can actually pull up metrics, and I can see how many minutes of the video you watched, where you guys stopped, other things like that. And so that's all part of this feedback loop. So it's part of that idea that there has to be a communication given out to multiple people. Now, we also have terms like social media or social communication. For example, interpersonal is kind of one-on-one or in small groups, but there's no mediated system. There's no computer, there's no radio, there's no phone, there's nothing acting. It's just one person talking to another. The feedback loop is very quick. But with social media, it's different from mass media, because in social media, everybody is a contributor. I make a comment, you make a comment, I like it, you respond, I comment on this, I comment on that, you add a photo, I add a photo. And so this becomes where there's not just one kind of supreme person giving out the message to everybody in a mass communication system, but rather there's a whole bunch of creators in that situation. We're going to talk about mass communication. We're going to talk about the history of all these groups, books, TV, radio, film, kind of where they developed, what they developed out of, the things they faced, the role of commercialization, the role of money in these things, a variety of things like that. But we're also going to look at basically anything that is media. Anything that is, computer technology, anything that acts as this middle thing, and how that affects our ability to understand and relate to the information, how that affects the communication. As far as it goes, one of the things that is interesting is there's a couple things I want to just kind of mention before we go in. A lot of different things that a class like this hopes to do is to try to create media literacy. And media literacy is basically the idea that you're able to be a critic and not just accept what you give. You're able to look at it and question it. And so what happens is that we are able to take it and say, like, what's going on here? Is it something deeper? What are the people trying to communicate? What are they saying? And so we become more knowledgeable and more aware of ways in which we may be affected by this communication. At the end of the day, there are a lot of that's kind of what the idea of media literacy. But the reality is we are affected in a very big way by the media. I mean, first of all, the idea of media is that, you can get this in a lot of ways very quickly, very easily. Like, for example, I'm talking right now to my phone. It used to be a phone was used for one purpose. Now there's a kind of this concept of platform agnosticism, where, for example, music doesn't have to be played on a record player. It can be played on a phone, a computer, a DVD player, a radio. I mean, there's, you can get it in a variety of places, a variety of methods. Video can be watched on a computer, a phone, other places. And so all of these, there's no longer just sort of platform exclusive media. Instead, it's kind of all mixed. And so that's a pretty important thing. But that has also allowed for us to very quickly access media that we wouldn't have been able to access anywhere else. And so it has increased our ability to spend. And it's actually pretty amazing. There's a chart in your book that gives the average daily usage between 2008 and 2014. And for example, TV's viewing has gone up a little. Radio has gone down a fair amount. Magazines have gone down. Newspapers have gone down significantly. Computer usage is fairly similar, but that's probably dropped a lot in the last 3 years. But the use of like tablets and mobile devices has just, it's night and day, the difference between what those amounts are. And so we have to be able to look and see that, we are making a very significant role, and this plays a very big role in our daily life, and that no longer is there a lot in between them. We'll look at the role of money and how that affects it. And we'll also look at how the technology has, changed, and we'll see how that has impacted our culture. You can read the first chapter to get a lot of this information. In the next chapter, I'll give a little bit more thorough, kind of point-by-point PowerPoint presentation. If you have any questions, let me know.